What is up, coin traders? Thanks for joining me for the show. We are looking at ICP Internet Computer. Been a little bit, and hope everyone is well right now. Looking at a pretty good setup overall for ICP Internet Computer. Still looking extremely nice, especially since we are still maintaining support on top of the exponential moving averages. We do know that a lot of cryptos right now have actually dipped below and seen their exponential moving averages start to roll over and find rejection and resistance on those. So still to be maintaining a very nice trend on top of these. Very good sign. Right now, this is the 2-day chart, and as you can see, we can even turn off the 50-period EMA here and see that, especially since we got our bullish cross here back at the end of October, been maintaining a very nice uptrend on top of these gaps, getting a little bit closer together, especially after finding this very nice solid back test of the 26. But as you can see on this 2-day chart, maintain a very nice lower shadow to maintain closing support on top of that candle. So very nice sign indeed. Now, secondly, in addition to not only maintaining closing support on top of the exponential moving averages, looking at a very nice zone of support coming in pretty much between the $10 psychological and just below 1050 at about 1046. So as you can see, big point and also big point of rejection. But so we're also looking at another very strong point here on the chart at 1165, and essentially looking left, big point of resistance that we know, big point of support here as well as resistance, and then now looking at it as that supportive point. So an extremely relevant level, especially now that we are starting to find a little bit of bullish upside and continuation after we did maintain support on top of this level and see that upside potential. So very good sign there as well. Next big level we'd be looking at is about 1270. And that was a point where we found a lot of rejection coming off the high when we did kick off about the $14 psychological level. So big point where prices touched or broke briefly on top of that level on this 2-day chart, but ultimately could not find a way to maintain closing candles on top of that big $14 level. So we know that up overhead 1268 is going to be a very big resistive level, as well as a $14 psychological. We'd love to actually see this break and then flip this into support in order to have a little bit more further upside. But we know that a little bit more pullback might be seen for the rest of the crypto space, and that we might see a little bit of playoff on that. But the good news is that, especially given the strength of this market and this trend, we know that favoritism is still very bullish right now. But we also know that when we do have parabolic moves, we also set up and consolidate for the next big parabolic move. So if we look at the previous, and let's actually go ahead and flip into the daily here, what we actually have is, we've talked about this before on the channel, we had a very nice parabolic move. Usually we see consolidation and that actually sets up for a bigger, higher parabolic move. So right now, still looking at a little bit more of consolidation points right now, but if we do break these nice resistance points up overhead, that could be what actually propels ICP into this next big leg of its next parabolic move. I think right now that might be a little bit speculative to think that we're just going to go parabolic from here again, especially after the rest of the crypto space might be looking like we're going to cool back for a little bit longer. But we know that we can still see plenty of opportunities for ICP to show a little bit more signs of gain, and even potentially running up to some of these upper resistance points up overhead. So if we do look at closing resistance on the daily chart, which we're looking at right now, 1440 is going to be that point, down to about the 1390 level. Oops, that came in extremely low. Yeah, about to the 1390, 1394 level. Definitely make sure to go ahead and drop me a follow over here on Twitter or X at coin_trades is the handle. Do talk a lot about different cryptos and chart setups, as well as a ton about ICP. So we're definitely looking forward to chatting with each and every one of you over on Twitter or X. Now, the last couple of weeks for ICP have been pretty critical, because when we did have this slippage below the daily exponential moving average, that was going to be one of the signs that we could look at to think that we could be seeing a little bit further pullback. But because we actually defended this extremely nice zone of support on top of the $10 psychological, we did now set our high, pull back, and now confirm a higher low being set. So that's why what happens in the next coming days is actually going to be so critical and important to establish a clear and defined direction, whether or not we can see prices rally on top of 1268 and then up to the daily price level at about $13 psychological. So if we can find prices get on top of the $13 level, good chance of actually flipping, maintaining support on top of 13 as well as 1268. So a pretty big zone of support that we could be then looking at to tackle some of these previous all-time highs, or trend highs rather, excuse me. But so if in fact we don't do that and we actually see rejection from the $12.60 and the $13 level, then we could be looking back to ultimately needing to defend support on top of about $12.25, which was a big point of support and resistance. So looking left, big point of resistance over here, big point of support as well, and then big point of support. So now let's go ahead and clear this up and basically briefly describe once again that what happens in the next few days to upcoming week or two is actually going to be a lot more critical and important for the longer term direction of ICP compared to what we have seen before. In addition to that, we also have a pretty clearly defined trend line coming in here that we're currently looking at touching. So whether or not we can actually find a bullish break and finding a back test and continuation off of this trend line will be another big important key factor on establishing this longer term direction. But we know that right now, kind of looking more or less at the point where we're starting to see a descending triangle after breaking this big 1050 level. So we could ultimately have seen a pullback to test this 1050 level once again before finally finding our upside move. But like we said, that's obviously the bullish case. Have to know the bearish case as well. So if we do reject from the current trend line and fail to make a new higher high in price, that would be looking to establish, like we mentioned, a support down to about 1125. Otherwise, backtesting the 1150 level for closing support on the daily. Now, flipping over here into the weekly chart, and a few key things to note is that over the last 4 weeks, we've actually seen a bearish engulfing candle. So we've had red previous, where the following on week after that actually fits inside the previous week, as well as the following on week as well. So what we have is we have 2 weeks that essentially sandwich in one bullish week body. Same thing on the following candles, that we actually have the body that completely fits in the previous bearish candle. So more or less, we are starting to form a longer term flag pattern. So it's not necessarily that bad of a sign, especially as we do have these exponential averages moving up. We could see this flag pattern play out, which kind of is also that descending triangle like we just talked about, especially having very clear lines for closing support and resistance established with this nice zone from about 1050, like we said, all the way up to about 1110. So another big reason why we're thinking this zone's just going to be pretty supportive, and we're actually going to be patient and wait a couple weeks in order to see if we can confirm whether or not we do get a retracement from this level, or on the current, whether or not we actually can see bullish continuation and a follow-on upside from there. Now, do want to pull up the technicals and specifically talk about the RSI right now. First, looking at the daily, and the thing about this is that the yellow line that comes through the RSI is actually the moving average for this RSI. And essentially what we can see is that typically when we have the RSI more or less staying on top of this RSI, or excuse me, the moving average for this RSI, we know that the move is strong. And then typically when we do break below and actually stay below this moving average for RSI, that's typically when we do start to see the trend consolidate and also not be as strong. Then finally, we do break to the upside, and that's when we find the next leg. So right now, since on the daily, we are starting to see a reversal, since we have been below this moving average for so long, ever since coming in at our trend high on the 3rd right now. So a big, long, prolonged pullback over the last month, and now finally looking at breaking on top of this moving average, as well as a back test, and still being able to defend support. So we would be looking at the RSI actually starting to maintain the path of least resistance to the upside on top of the moving average for this RSI. So that does mean that if this does continue to play out, we're at a little bit more higher likelihood of a continuation to the upside on this current move right now. So same sort of thing looking at the 2-day RSI as well. We're about to see an intersection and a cross right now of the RSI for the moving average. So ever since we do see that and we do have our established trend, then that's pretty much a good sign for positive bullish momentum. So right now, to know that this pullback and sideways movement is coming to a close based on the RSI crossing the moving average could be another very strong factor leading to an indication that we could be seeing the next pump come in for ICP, potentially testing these upper levels at around 12 and even up to the current trend high, up over the $16 level. So while we have this pulled up too, also want to look at stochastic RSI, since we have had a bullish cross right now and are trending back on top of the 20 line. So this oscillator does have room to keep going to the upside, as well as the RSI, as well as the prices. So we do have a lot of potential for strength to come in based on a lot of the indicators and also the current setup and chart formation based on the longer terms anyway. Now, looking at the 4-hour chart here really quick before we wrap up, because I do want to turn on VPVR volume profile, visible range, and talk about center of mass right now coming in just below the $13 level, about $12.90. So big point of resistance, as well as the heart line coming in. So support, heart line for this overall consolidation move. So a very, very relevant line with a lot of previous volume for trading coming in right at that level. So that's another reason why we think it might be a little bit of a struggle. But because we've actually already established this is a resistance point, pulled back and set a longer term higher low, we could be looking at a little bit more ease, especially kicking off this big point of support in mass, especially after breaking it, back testing it, finally being able to find our struggle. So this is going to be our very important relevant level from about 12.90 all the way up to 13. If in fact we do see prices break above that, I would have a lot more confidence in the price being able to rally up to about the $14 level and then even potentially up to the 15. Obviously, we're probably going to see a retracement and pullback to that level as well, but that's why this overall setup is pretty exciting, because a lot of potential and a lot of great things going on right now with this current ICP chart. So yeah, like we said, should be expecting a little bit of good things, especially as long as we do still maintain some of these supports and punch through some of these overhead resistances. Chart setup is favoring that type of action though, and as long as we don't get any sort of crazy bear event and sort of pullback out of the rest of the crypto space, we will be looking good here. Alrighty, well, that is going to do it and wrap up our video for ICP Internet Computer. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. If you have not done so just yet, do appreciate it. And as well, appreciate all the continued love and support. It does mean so much. Make sure to drop me a note down in the comment sections with any issues, disagreements, all that stuff down below. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. That is it for now, though, so stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.